Okay, so dreams versus where we are. Anyone spot the gap? Let's talk about it and what we might do. I'm now going to invite 4 relatively junior people up to our first panel before we go to dinner. Forgive them if their knowledge is lacking. Drasko Jelavic of Cirtuo, Elouise Epstein of Carney, Sam Achampong of CIPS, and Lance Younger of ProcureTech. I shall now sit at the end where I belong. Please, welcome to the stage. Bravo. Now, the only exam question is whether the microphones are switched on, but we're going to find out. Here we go. Okay. One's going to get nicked. Fine. 4 questions. Right. We've done introductions for 2. Welcome, gentlemen. Sam, do you want to introduce yourself quickly, and then we'll go Lance as well?
Sure, yeah. The microphone works, by the way, so just testing. Sam Achampong, I'm the Regional Director for CIPS, the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply for the Middle East and North Africa region.
Hi, I'm Lance Younger, CEO and founder of ProcureTech.
Right. We're going to set the scene. Just so that I'm kind of with Elouise. Procurement isn't difficult. It's just buying stuff. Because let's face it, that's kind of what we do on Amazon. Cats can probably do it on Amazon. Why are we taking so long to do it? So look, what I just want to want each of you now, and we'll just go for just a short answer. What is it that procurement manages to do to make this so difficult and complex for our organizations? Lance, I'm going to give you the chance to go first. You know, what is it? Why do we make it so hard?
Purchasing or category management?
You could put it all into one bucket, but you know, if you spoke to our stakeholders, they'd kind of say, what's the difference, which is a problem in itself. But why do we make it complex?
I guess, you know, we've covered a lot of ground just in the last 2 presentations that we've talked about as well. And we orientated a little bit back to the users and what the users want. Now that's the customer or the business inside, but it's also the suppliers as well. And what we do too much is we introduce too much governance, too many steps, too much data, and we don't make it simple. I mean, you referred to complexity and the ease that you can actually work through things. I think as well, you know, fundamentally, we don't spend enough time training people and building the capability of the people within procurement so they can respond in the right way, and ultimately as well enable that with their technology as well. You know, my background is consulting, and I've been a CPO at Goldman Sachs for a few years as well. In that period of time, I've consistently seen charts and data like this, which basically says we don't have enough capacity, we don't have enough capability. It's not going to change. And that's the thing, is that fundamentally something will have to change. That is either a significant step up in how much we invest in people, or significant change, which is going to be technology driven. And so, yes, we've got complexity apparent, but it's going to be simplified one way or another, whether we do it ourselves or technology does it.
Sam, what's your take? What is it that makes this complex?
Well, first of all, it's not complex at all. I think we do make it complex. I think traditionally, as procurement professionals, we've probably wanted it to be complex, because let's face it, we all do a job where we get paid to spend other people's money, right? and there's no other job in the world that is defined in that way. So I think traditionally we've made it complex, but it needn't be complex. I think, as was mentioned before, people refer to procurement for different things. Some people think we're there to add compliance. Some people think we're there to, you know, beat up the suppliers. People have different takes on what procurement is. In a way, we do all of those things, but actually take the complexity out of it. The only definition I take about procurement that's relevant is we're here to obtain goods and services for the lowest total cost of ownership, and that's it, right? So it's very straightforward. There is actually no other real definition. The complexity comes in defining what total cost of ownership is, because that's changed over the years. You know, before it used to be, okay, what's the cheapest thing? Then it evolved into saying, adding into, I guess life cycle costs. But now, total cost of ownership means an awful lot more. It could be brand damage. It could be ESG consideration. So the only complex part of it is for us to interpret what today total cost of ownership is to your organization. Because if you're a government, then total cost of ownership could mean you actually need to engage with SMEs a bit more, because that's relevant. Most companies now need to make sure they're not damaging their brand, so they're utilizing ESG philosophies. So the only complex part of procurement is when you're defining what does total cost of ownership mean to you. And to me, that's quite straightforward.
Is it though?
Well, we're going to come back to that.
Probably should be, but yeah, I can't answer that.
Elouise, you've got a mic. There we go.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm good.
You're live.
I would say two quick things. One is we are still in the shadow of finance, so we are doing finance's bidding and dirty work. And so on one hand, that's that. And then the other thing I would point to is, as a profession, we're only 25, 30 years old. And so what we did 25, 30 years ago that has become enshrined as the best practice has changed. And our best practices and our training and all of these things I talked about, and even the tools, have been slow to change, even though everything Sam just talked about, TCO, has changed, and we need to sort of move towards that. So,
Drasko.
I think it's a difficult one, but I was thinking about the answers, and the several ways to look on the complexity, and maybe for this discussion it's helpful that the chart you show on complexity, how to order things and how to actually initiate purchase orders. I'm wondering why it didn't get better over time. I'm more than 20 years in procurement, and it's the same as I started as a category manager. And we have invested so much money into different tools and systems, so it's billions, if not trillions. And when I look at the systems and tools we have in place for these basic procurement processes, there are in many times designed, or in many cases designed by the people who actually don't understand procurement, So it roots in understanding of procurement, what it does, how the process should look like, who are the stakeholders, what does it mean to efficiently buy stuff, right? So that's one side of the complexity, just designing the wrong systems to support procurement because it doesn't come from procurement people. And the second dimension of complexity would be the complexity, and especially we experienced that in the last couple of years since the COVID and different layers of disruption started, is that the number of business requirements of procurement has increased. With cost reductions, we have ESG and diversity and growth and so on. So there is a kind of cognitive overload for many category managers. So if you combine these two complexities, the world gets really complex. It's currently not easy to be in procurement. I mean, that's why we're here today and tomorrow to answer the question how we can support procurement to at least manage complexity in the future.
Okay, so I'm going to go for a one-word answer question, just to follow on. Right, we're all spring chickens. I mean, we're new to procurement, right? We don't have much experience. But everything you've just described, I'm just wondering if we had this discussion 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years, would it actually have been any different, apart from you might not have said I? Genuinely, is procurement more complex now than it was 10, 20 years ago? And I'm just going to go quick yes-no answer, because then I'm going to do a straw poll. Lance, yes, no?
100%.
100%. 100%.
200%.
200%.
partially.
Partially, okay?
Got more complex, definitely.
Got more complex, right. Complex because, as you've just described, external factors, legislation, complexity of, it's not about cost anymore, it's about a variety of different competing value. But one thing that didn't pick up, and we're going to explore this tomorrow, and we're going to talk a lot about engagement. Tech is great, but we have to talk to people, right? To what extent is it more complex because of the environment versus more complex because our stakeholders that are giving us business requirements don't actually know what they need anymore because they are also in such a complex world that they can't even tell you what they want? So my question to you is complexity limited to procurement having a more difficult world, or is actually our job made harder because the people we're serving, they are more complex? I mean, Lance, you see the span of procurement tech.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the complexity, coming back to your point about total cost of ownership, has got greater because we've gone from looking at price to cost to risk, sustainability, innovation, and that scope has increased. And if you look at each one of those individual areas, I think what people are buying, there's still a pretty common understanding. You know, it's getting a bit better. But the bit that I do agree with you 100% is the risk and the level of risk and how complex that is,
yep.
but also how much more procurement is involved in it than they were in the past. Meaning they have to have a lot more knowledge of not just the first tier, second, third, fourth tier, and that brings a load of unknowns, right. Which, going back to your point, means it's more difficult for the business to understand it, as well as ourselves as well.
Right. Elouise, I'm going to come to you for a minute before I go back to Sam. I mean, you know, you're coming at from the concern. What's your take on that?
So I actually think the complexity comes from the consumers and the collapse of or maybe expansion of the value chain, where when I buy something, I want to know where it was manufactured, what materials went into it, and this flattening of the source material to the finished product, and perhaps even the reverse logistics to get whatever the product, or to make it reusable, or the packaging or whatnot. So I think consumer demand has changed, which has changed our business and made it more complex for the business stakeholders, which in turn has made it difficult for them to figure out what they want from us.
Got it. And Sam, I mean, you're looking at it from the view of our professional body. I mean, are you hearing this message as well, or?
Yeah, I think so. And I was going to say that from my point of view, the difference is the remit of the professional.
Right.
So, you know, we used to be called purchasing. Yeah. And actually that's quite straightforward. Yeah. So whoever in the business says go and buy a car, you just go and buy a car. So it's actually the remit. Since we become procurement, we get involved in supply chain and all other, whatever definitions you want to call it now, is a lot more broader than purchasing. So you do actually have to take into account a lot of things, because within an organization, you know, your HR team may know, you know, what companies have bad HR reputations. Your health and safety team may have that data. Your risk and mitigation team may have data. Your finance team may know the financial capability of certain organizations. But who within the organization is positioned to take a helicopter view of all of those on behalf of the organization? Procurement has stepped up to take that role to make sure that the decision is holistic. So we've stepped up, we've taken the responsibility, we changed our name from being purchasing. That's what makes it more complex in this day and age.
Drasko, I know you've got a big view on this.
Yeah, as a trigger to my answer, actually, I recall the statistic Mark showed that 86% of stakeholders don't know what they do in a category management process. I find that number really mind-blowing. And it reminds me, every time we validated strategies, category strategies with more tactical people, there was a sense of high complexity. So if this is a peer-to-peer validation, it was always like you could sense that the folks on the other side, either production or development or quality, whatever, they struggle in the same way as procurement people do. There is a cognitive overload. And Richard, as you mentioned in the introduction of the question, they also don't know what they need, right? And every time we approached actually more senior people up to the C level, because some of the categories and suppliers will be worth billions, it's a business and business. And when you listen to the language of the senior stakeholders, the complexity is gone. You get a clear message, what the business wants, what it needs. So there is a chance to reduce the complexity if you actually understand the purpose of procurement, what I'm here for, and then translate the purpose of procurement into a corresponding procurement strategy. And for at least top categories, top suppliers, you cover your business requirements with the senior stakeholders. There is a chance to tackle complexity from the right angle.
I'm going to do a straw poll. Hands up if you are not part of Cirtuo, if you're part of a procurement team in an organization. Put your hands up in there. Okay. Keep your hands up. No. This is part of our gym. We can swap hands in a minute. Keep your hands up if your decisions in procurement factor in something about cost. Okay. Hands up if your procurement decision factors in something about CO2. Few hands dropped. Factor in if it includes something about water consumption. Factor in if it includes something about human rights. And some different hands went up when other ones went down. Right. We talked about total cost of ownership. We're procurement professionals, and we've got an inconsistency in the decisions we're making. So not only do our customers, stakeholders, not know what they need or want, we don't know what's going on in the outside world, and we have a decision-making process which isn't consistent either. Now I'm going to open this to the entire floor. Hands up if you buy stuff online. Hands up if you consider, or have even, keep your hands up, everyone, if you buy something online. Who has ever made a buying decision online based on the CO2 impact of what you were buying? Right. Why? It's the same problem you have. It's the same problem that procurement have. So now let's come back to the killer question. If we're going to make a difference as a function in that complex world and that complex set of understanding, and the answer we've always told people is that category strategies are the key to unlocking, genuinely, what is it we need to do to make that true? How can category strategies genuinely address all of that complexity that comes from lack of knowledge, too much knowledge, lack of information, too much information? How will category strategies make a difference going forward? Sam, you're nodding. I'm going to come to you first.
Was I the only one nodding?
You were.
That's okay then. I was just agreeing with you. But no, I think, look, there is a danger, isn't there, that as procurement professionals, I think as Elouise was saying, that we're going to become extinct, right? Because technology, not as human beings, but as in the profession we're doing, because technology is overtaking our capacity to know what boxes to tick, and there's lots of moving parts when you're making a total cost of ownership decision because it changes per company. So we need to continue to add value. We need to continue to demonstrate to an organisation that we're on top of this. So on whatever category you're buying, we put those questions there. We make sure that we're mitigating risk. Number one, for me, risk mitigation is the number one skill for procurement professional right now. After that, it's kind of influencing skills, but risk mitigation is the one because it costs money, right? You know, right. So for me, we continue to add value by knowing what constitutes total cost of ownership in accordance with the category at the time and place.
Lance, what's your take?
I've got a couple of perspectives on it. First of all, for the different sets of criteria, I think that's a good thing. It's a hint towards people addressing complexity. Yep. So different companies having different sets of requirements, differentiating themselves, and therefore putting different selection criteria in. And if you carry that thought a little bit further forward with two examples, one is what Elouise put up here. You know, Tom went in, said, I want to buy a laptop. Which one do you want to buy? And then 5 clicks later, he's bought something. Now, what you don't see is everything that goes behind that, which is the decision intelligence, or the category intelligence that's baked into the solution that kind of guides you through. So I think, yes, you need to have the category intelligence or decision intelligence, but it might not be as overt as you expect it to be. It might be embedded within your buying process because of how it's been programmed. So that's one example. The other example, which is a little bit different, and I know Drasko's on top of this, and you'll hear a lot about it over the next day or so, is the fact that a lot of people nowadays are talking about intake. So I want to buy. And Elouise and I have had a debate about what I'm about to say, so we can continue over the next days, is that I actually think the category strategy is often the start of the process as well. That's the intake. And when you create a strong category strategy, then it basically infers that you should go somewhere, you should do something. But then how does it do it automatically? And I know a few of you start to look into that, but you've got the intelligence coming through, you've got the category strategy sitting on top, and then you've got some action that comes out at the tail end of it. And it depends where you start that process. So 2 examples of intelligence hidden behind Tom, and intelligence a bit more overt.
Elouise, I hesitate to ask, but go on. What category management isn't dead because we're here, but how's it going to really help in the future?
Well, I think go back to the flattening of the value chain. We got to have new products, and the consumer expects them to be green or not creating pollution or water quality or human rights, or just simple risk mitigation. That's the job of category management, and to help the product designers bring that together. And I'm building on Sam's point about relationship management. I agree. It's one of the top. I think digital is probably the most important, but relationship management, because we can meet the business. When I talk about we're the business together, that's where category management, that's what next generation. And so when I think about it, it is very much of who's our supply base, how do we assure supply, how do we avoid risk, how do we embody ESG. A product designer can't do all of that. There's no way. And it's not even their job. That's our job. And if we meet them with the decision insight, as Lance said, and with the relationship skills Sam was talking about, that's how we do it.
So Drasko, I'm kind of hoping you're going to say that category strategies do present an opportunity to address.
You can bet on that.
Go on.
And also this is the trend we see in the last years. As mentioned, it was between 2010 and 2020, it was so difficult to sell on category strategy because the life in procurement was a kind of, I would say not boring, but one-dimensional, right? Just around cost reductions. And once actually all that complexity kicked into several layers of disruption, we see more and more companies coming back to us and enhancing their, hoping to enhance actually their category strategy approaches, right? And if understood and applied properly, we say that category strategy builds on what you mentioned, actually understanding the market challenges and triggers and changes in the industry landscape of your suppliers, for example. But more importantly, it's about alignment with the stakeholders. So proper category strategies built on business requirements and understanding and addressing the challenges, that's where the category strategy and supplier strategy should be resulting with. So it strongly asks for alignment with the stakeholders, and it's a difficult part, of course, especially as now with the new business requirements, there will be conflictory business requirements between ESG and cost reductions and maybe some other points. So therefore, category strategy, primarily to a need for business and stakeholder alignment, is the good way to address and manage complexity.
Got it. Okay, we're going to do a final 15-second one-shot question. Mark gave us some pretty horrific figures on the maturity of our profession, which sadly are not that different from the figures from last year. If you were going to suggest one thing, just one thing to one of those starters in an organization that's so immature it doesn't even realize how immature it is, what one thing would you suggest to them to start that journey that you've just described? I'm going to go down the line. Do you want to take a second? Or you?
Start on that line.
Yeah, go on. I'm going to go to you first. He gets the finale. It's his conference. Come on.
I've got a keynote tomorrow morning, and I've got one thing I'm going to tell you about. It's leadership. That's the one thing. We have a leadership cliff challenge in procurement, and we need to get more leaders, digital leaders.
Digital leaders. Sam?
I think for want of duplicating what anyone else has said, I think intelligence and education. I think it's a bit of a misnomer with technology. People think you don't need as smart people as you needed before in procurement. I disagree. I think you need smarter people in procurement, probably less of them, to be able to interpret system needs and actually to integrate with a system properly. So I think it's intelligence. We need educated, skillful commercial managers in procurement and more of them.
Leadership, smarter people.
Well, I was going to say leadership, and I didn't want to repeat digital. What I would say, and education would have been my third one. So I'll be much more controversial. I think you either avoid hiring a lot of people or you fire most of the people you have. And I know that sounds harsh, and I don't mean like just kick them to the curb. I just mean eliminate the positions. And you're seeing this in Silicon Valley, and just today, Google let a bunch of people go because they're replacing them with AI. So I think you can run if you're in that bucket, you have nothing to lose. Don't build up the infrastructure and the people, just go right to the lean organization and deal with the bumps along the way.
Leadership, smarter people in an organization that's better balanced between people and AI. Let's soften the blow. Drasko, what one thing would you suggest?
I mean, you initiated that with the question. When we approach organizations, often we struggle with two things. They resist to change and they want to stick to PowerPoint, Excel, or to the old process, how they do it today. And another one which was incorporated in your question is they don't know how much they don't know. So the missing insight on where are we today, where should we be, what does it mean to be strategic in procurement is really a big trouble. So I would say many companies we are talking to are not to fully extent aware what does it mean to be strategic. And this is something which we inherited over the last decades with strategic sourcing minded, whatever it should be, education, right? So it's a kind of mix between strategy and tactics, and it's actually nothing. So we really understood to confuse the people over time. And the proper answer is actually leadership. We need strong, I like that, digital leaders. We often struggle when we see CPOs in large companies which haven't tackled strategies or are not familiar with the strategies for their key categories even 1 year after they started the job, because they are busy with organization and basics in procurement and data and digital roadmap. These things are really hard to believe. So we probably need, I don't know, more education or just look for different type of leaders to make it happen.
Amazing, isn't it, that if we talk about transformation in technology, the things that enable it are essentially leadership from people, smarter people, redesigning the balance of people, and educating people to know what they need to achieve. So how about that? People do have a future in shaping what we do in category strategies. The panelists, on behalf of the audience, thank you very much indeed. Bravo.